Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon to all participants and welcome to the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies webinar titled IA-CEPA, Building an Economic Powerhouse in Food Value Chains. My name is Dira. I will be your MC and host for today, and I hope everyone who is attending the webinar today, both on Zoom and YouTube, are staying healthy during this pandemic. On behalf of CIPS, I would like to wish a blissful Ramadan to our Muslim participant and also a happy Galungan Day to our Hindu participants. To give a brief information about our organization, the Center for Indonesian Policy Studies, or shortened as CIPS, is an independent, non-profit, and non-partisan think tank that advocates for practical policy reforms informed by evidence-based policy research and analysis. Our policy perspectives are based on the belief that only civil, political, and economic freedom allows Indonesians to achieve greater prosperity. CIPS have discussed policy strategies to maximize economic opportunities through several international trade agreements, including the IA-CEPA. You can access our policy papers through our website on www.chips-indonesia.org, and you can download our papers for free. Before I hand over the discussion to our moderator today, I would like to remind everyone that you can ask questions to our speakers by using the Q&A feature on Zoom. I will post on the chat box on the format of your questions. If you are watching this webinar on YouTube, you can ask questions through the chat box and our colleague will relay those questions to our moderator. Without further ado, I would like to invite our junior researcher, Nur Halima Anjani, to lead the discussion today with our speakers. Halima, the screen is all yours.
Thank you, Dira, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Halima, and I will be your moderator today. I would like to thank all participants for coming in today. It's nice to see a very diverse audience today. And since we have begun the month of Ramadan, I hope all of our Muslim participants have a great Ramadan this year. And also, I would like to wish Happy Galungan Day to our Hindu participant. Today's discussion is based on our recently new released policy paper titled Indonesia Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, Building the Powerhouse. With the help of my colleague Dira, she will share the link to the paper you download and read. For those of you who are joining us through YouTube, you can also visit our website to download the paper. It is available both in English and also Bahasa Indonesia. Moving on, allow me to give the background of our discussion today. Today's webinar is the continuation of our previous discussion on building powerhouse in the education sector through the IA-CEPA. But today, we are going to discuss the opportunity arising from the food and beverage powerhouse between Indonesia and Australia. The powerhouse concept seeks to establish a value chain across two countries in order to produce and supply and product to other countries outside the agreement. IA-CEPA will be particularly suitable for establishing this concept in the food and beverage manufacturing sector, as it can leverage both Indonesia's substantial food and beverage manufacturing capacity with Australian agricultural capability. The question is, how can this economic partnership model shape Indonesia and Australia role in food and beverage value chain? How can both countries implement a food and beverage powerhouse strategically? And can the powerhouse concept support economic recovery and resilience for the future of both countries? Here today we already have three experts to share more about maximizing this opportunity in the food and beverage sector through the IA-CEPA. First, we have Arianto Patundru, board member and from the Center of Indonesian Policy Study, and one of the authors from our newly released IA-CEPA paper. Second, we have Christine Gruger, First Secretary Economy from the Australia Embassy in Indonesia. And then last but not least, we have Ibu Nima de Ayu Martini, Director of Bilateral Negotiation, Director General of International Trade, Ministry of Trade. Hello, everyone. I hope you are doing well and healthy.
Hello, good
afternoon. As Dira has mentioned before, I would like to remind today's participants to ask questions through the Q&A feature in Zoom and also the chat box in YouTube. Please use the format of whom the question you are addressing, your institution, and then your question. We will start from all the three speakers and then proceed with the Q&A session. To open our discussion today, I would like to invite Bapak Arianto Patundru, or we usually call him by Pak Aco, to give a 15-minute presentation about our discussion today. To Pak Aco, the screen is all yours.
Thank you so much, Nur Halima. It's really great to be presenting here with colleagues, Bu Christina and my good friend, Ibu Made. Very good to see you in this event. And as Nur Halima and also Dira already mentioned, we just published a policy paper on this topic. So I'm just gonna go through the general points and not the details, but for those of you who want to know the more detailed analysis, please download the paper and we have the information there. So let me now share my screen. Okay, I hope it is shown now. Okay, so the theme here is how to build an economic powerhouse in food value chain. And I understand that last week we have another seminar on this, the first part of this seminar, which also is based on our policy paper by Andre. And that was focused on investment, especially on the higher education. But now we are looking on the other case that we highlight in the policy paper, and that is the food value chain. So just to motivate the discussion, so we usually start with the question of why Indonesia and Australia, despite the fact that they are neighbors, very close neighbors, but we still see that the trade and investment flow among the two countries are still very thin. So that is less than 3% for trade and less than 2% for investment. But the answer lies on the fact that because they are actually quite similar, right? So both countries are mainly based on resources, natural resources. And even though Indonesia is a developing country and Australia is a developed country, but both actually are benefiting a lot from their resources, natural resources. So for example, Indonesia's exports are dominated by natural resources, palm oil, coal, and oil and gas. And these account for 30% of the total goods exported from Indonesia. On the other hand, Australia is also dominated by resources, coal, iron ore, gas, and also gold. And these four commodities alone take more than half of its total goods exports. So they're quite similar. So how do we deal with this? There are potentials, of course. And one way to do that is to go down to the disaggregate level. So the key is actually to improve economic relationship by exploiting complementarities rather than similarities, of course. While it is similar on the aggregate level, but if we go down to disaggregate level, and we will find some complementarities, and that's where we can exploit these potential collaborations. For example, on branches of food and beverages, right now there has been discussion about electric hybrid vehicles and so forth. So the concept of economic powerhouse really fits into this framework, and that's also why in the policy paper we suggested that the economic cooperation program of the IA-CEPA really needs to focus on this economic powerhouse model rather than on bilateral give and takes. So just to give some examples. So Indonesia can only produce 50% of the national demand of meat products, while on the other hand, 50% of Australia's live cattle exports go to Indonesia. So we can see already some potentials there. So, one ways to do that is that Indonesian people may consider investing in cattle stations in Australia and then send them proceed back to Indonesia in terms of to feedlots in Indonesia, for example. On the other hand, Australia can invest in production hub for meat products in Indonesia using the ingredients, then to target regional markets, ASEAN, and so forth. And similarly, Indonesia is as the biggest importer of grain, can also benefited by collaborating with Australia, as the latter supports almost 50% industry in West Java in terms of their need for wheat flour. Going into food processing industry, some background of food processing and food sectors in Indonesia. So food and beverage manufacturing is actually the second largest category of Indonesian exports after mining. It contributed around 30 to 40% of total manufacturing output. And of course, manufacturing sector is actually the largest contributor of the GDP. And then food processing employs around 20% of all manufacturing workers. And this sector actually varies. The employment in this sector started from MSE, micro and small enterprises, all the way to big players like Indofood, Wings, Mayora, Garuda Food, and so forth. Also, MNC, multinational corporations like Nestle, Heinz, Kraft, Unilever, and Danone. And this alone gives us an idea that this sector is quite complicated in terms of policy, because there are small players, micro players, but also big players that some of them actually are market leaders in the industry. The next one is that investment on food processing industry keeps increasing if we see the data, and the biggest domestic in terms of secondary investment into 2019 is this food processing industry, and in terms of foreign FDI, foreign direct investment, it is the third after chemical and pharmaceuticals and basic metals in Indonesia. So the potentials of food products in Indonesia and Australia, as we laid out in the report. So both countries are still small players, of course, at the global level. Each has a share of less than 2%. And also, if we relate this with the concept of global value chain, we can see that actually both countries are still lagging behind the GVC or global value chains, represented by the fact that the foreign content in export for food products in both Indonesia and Australia is just very small. So 4% Indonesia and Australia, about 12%, compared to, for example, Malaysia and Taiwan, 24 and 35% respectively. So this suggests that there's a big opportunity for joint forces. But also it shows that at the moment, Indonesia and Australia has a lot to do to catch up in this global value chain, which is actually the trend in the near future in terms of global trade pattern. So how IA-CEPA can help? So IA-CEPA provides for example, preferential access for more than 99% of Australian agricultural products. And the tariff for feed grain will be eliminated, even though it's gradual. And IA-CEPA also provides industrial training program through grain partnership. And the beneficiaries will include flour mills, baked goods, and noodle producers. And these partnerships also seeks to improve food quality and safety standards and so forth. Now, on the Powerhouse concept, so basically, this idea has been floating around. So the two countries have explored this concept, the Powerhouse concept, for red meat since 2019 under the program called Red Meat and Cattle Partnership. So this experience will be valuable to build Powerhouse in other sectors as well. Some lessons, what to do or what not to do, we can reflect on the experience. And IA-CEPA also provides industrial training program, as I mentioned before, and the partnership also seeks to improve food quality and safety to broader third country markets. Of course, this powerhouse concept is actually to join force Australia and Indonesia to cater for the third market. For example, Indonesia is a hub for ASEAN, Australia is a hub for Pacific market. So there are some necessary reforms that we mentioned in the report. First, of course, when we discuss about the reduction of non-tariff measures that can be problematic when they become non-tariff barriers, there is chapter 3 in IA-CEPA that focuses on these issues. And it also we also mentioned that the effective rate of protection in food products actually is still very high, second only to food crops. There are homeworks to do there. And then we note that there are more non-conforming measures in Indonesia than in Australia. So working together and maybe through economic cooperation program to address these issues will be beneficial, not only for food processing sector, but also for other sectors. And also Indonesia is undergoing reforms through different channels as well. So we mentioned in the last webinar about the omnibus law. Of course, there are challenges in terms of this law, but in general, the spirit is to streamline the business procedures in Indonesia, and that will also help in terms of implementing IA-CEPA and actually other trade agreements as well. So the increasing use of import substitution, this is also one thing that we focus on how to deal with import substitution strategy so as not to hinder this kind of agreements. Of course, we understand that, especially during this COVID time, many governments are looking inward, but we argue that it's going to be unproductive in terms of pushing for more trade investment among the regions. So it is important to avoid contradictory rules and policies among the many agreements Indonesia is signing, including more recently RCEP. This is also one issue that we address, and we hope that initiative like IA-CEPA, ECP is going to also look at this important issue to deal with. So that's some introduction from me. I hope to engage in the Q&A in the next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pak Aco, for the presentation. To summarize a little bit of Pak Aco's presentation, first, there is still a lot of existing opportunity in trade for both Australia and Indonesia by exploiting complementaries instead of similarity. Second, food and beverage industry for both countries are still small player with share less than 2%, which shows that both countries have a lot of untapped opportunity. And then the third one is IA-CEPA, provide industrial training, seek to improve food and quality standard, and also the powerhouse concept in red meat can be an inspiration to build powerhouse in other sectors. And then last is necessary reform is needed, and omnibus law should play a clear role in pushing the Indonesia, as well as avoid contradictory rules and policy among the agreement that currently signed by Indonesia. Before going to the next presenter, I would like to invite all participants today to ask questions on the Q&A feature in the Zoom and also the chat box in YouTube. And next, we are going to have a presentation from the Australia Embassy. Christine to give presentation. To Christine, the screen is all yours.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank you to CIPS for this opportunity to present on the food powerhouse with Indonesia. I'll just share my, I'll just share my screen now. and to thank you for that, and also to thank you to Pak Arianto for a very interesting introduction to this topic. And it makes me pleased that you've pretty much covered everything, so I'm looking forward to that. So I'm having a little bit of a look at where the food and beverage trade is with Australia. But I thought I'd take a step back and have a look at what's happened over the past couple of years. I think we all know that global growth has fallen. The IMF has estimated that global growth contracted by 3.3% last year. In Indonesia, the contraction was smaller at 2.1%, and also it was smaller in Australia as well at 2.4%. And next year, along with the world growing at about 6%, Indonesia and Australia are also expected to grow at 4.3% and 4.5% respectively. So what we can expect is that hopefully as we recover, trade will recover. As the graph, the figure shows you, which I've taken from UNCTAD, global trade fell because of COVID. It fell by about 9% overall in 2020, with global goods trade falling by about 6% and services trade, which you can see as the red line, falling by about 16.5%. And of course, given that services trade is transport and tourism, it's not surprising that it fell so sharply and hasn't yet recovered. So what we've seen is, as the COVID crisis perhaps wasn't as bad as was expected, so there was some recovery in global goods trade. Turning now to Indonesia, we can see that Indonesia's, this is just goods trade, also fell during 2020, in the first half of 2020, and recovered during the second half. You can see quite a big surge in exports there, and that occurred including because of a large increase in the price of palm oil, which is a major export of Indonesia. What this graph doesn't show you, but is also interesting, I think, is that services exports for Indonesia fell by more than half, more than 50% in 2020, reflecting obviously tourism and other services, but also services imports were lower by 37%. Oh, sorry about that. Moving on to the next one. What this table shows you is just the composition of about the top 10 Indonesian exports and imports. And what is interesting about it, I think, is that you can see that there are similar things on both sides. So, for example, number 3, export and import, is actually electrical machinery and equipment. And so what this shows you is that at these aggregated levels, that trade is generally two-way. We can't, while we might need to get down to disaggregated levels to work out exactly what was happening, because we are importing and exporting different things, although they're given the same name, we can't say that, we have to look more holistically at our trade, because it's not just a one-way street in any single product. Moving on to the next picture, and apologies for the blurriness of this one. I just wanted to show you bilateral trade between Australia and Indonesia. And you can see that over the past 20 years, trade has indeed grown, both in terms of goods and in terms of services between our two countries. And so overall, as you will probably see, Australia exports more goods to Indonesia, but Indonesia exports more services to Australia. And again, once again, that's primarily tourism. So in 2019-20, the trade was worth about $16.2 billion, which was down from 2019. And our largest single export item is actually a services export, which is education. So, and our largest import item is actually refined petroleum. So, looking at the next graph, the distinctions are a bit clearer. Again, you can see that even though Indonesia also manufactures coal, or produces coal, Australia also exports coal to Indonesia because the demand for that product, the type of product that is needed is slightly different to the one that is produced in Indonesia. Live animals is a major export to Indonesia, and also refined petroleum is a major export from Indonesia, import to Australia. And once again, the services trade is, very important between our two countries. So turning now to, and here is the top 8 again, and you can see that, once again, when you look at these very aggregated trade levels, this is at something called the Harmonized System or HS code 2-digit level. There are some fairly common products on both sides, even for Australia and Indonesia. So turning now to food and agricultural exports to Indonesia. So as we've said, Australia has some major trade in cereals, in live animals, in meat, sugar and confectionery, also dairy produce, honey and other animal products. I've got two columns here, one which shows the change between 2020 and 2019, and the other one that shows the change between 2020 and the average over 2016 to 2019. And the reason for that is because Australian exports to Indonesia can be quite variable. And so what you can see in our top 5 exports, these are the top 5 for the average period, most of those have fallen. So cereals fell by about 8%, animals by over 20%, and meat products by over 20%. But we seem to be spending a lot more time perhaps eating confectionery. I'm not quite sure what the biggest chocolate bar or other sugar-based confectionery is to Indonesia, but we're certainly sending more of it to Indonesia. And you'll see the large change in cereals in the second column, and that reflects the drought in Australia. And since there was much less wheat to provide to Indonesia, of course, our trade was reduced. I just wanted to put some of the next 5 food and agricultural exports to Indonesia so you can see what they are. It's fruit and vegetables, it's food industry products, and the one that I do like is the preparations of cereals, flour, starch, pastry cooked products. And that's also something that experienced quite a big change in 2020. And I sort of sit there and wonder whether that reflects the trend towards some home baking that has happened during COVID. And so again, we look at what is happening over the short term, but over the long run, we've also seen some reduction. Now, looking at what Indonesia exports to Australia, I think you can see that these are smaller amounts, and the top one is actually also preparations of cereal, flour, starch, or milk and pastry cooked products. And that reflects sort of perhaps some leftovers of the wheat milling industry, because a lot of wheat sent from Australia to Indonesia is also milled here, and therefore some of the products that are byproducts of that milling process get re-exported. There's some cocoa, again, that's a big jump up during COVID. And Oddly enough, tobacco was also quite a big jump during COVID, so hopefully people aren't too worried. And then these are some other things, these are some other exports to Australia. What you can see broadly is that the exports of food and agricultural products to Australia from Indonesia haven't really fallen by very much over the past year in response to COVID, so that trade has remained quite steady. They have fallen a bit on the Australian side, however. So one of the questions that CIPS has asked me is what have been the key challenges to expanding trade, and then how IA-CEPA addresses these challenges. So when looking at the key challenges to expanding trade, I've had a look at some recent surveys done by the Australian ASEAN Chamber of Commerce and some of the top 3 challenges to trade with Indonesia they've highlighted are barriers to ownership, corruption, political instability. And when they get down to some more detailed levels, some of the things that they've highlighted are government bureaucracy, unfair business practices and corruption, and weak law enforcement. Now, of course, these are perceptions by Australian businesses, and so they may not reflect the experience on the ground for a large number of businesses actually in Indonesia, but they may reflect some barriers to people who are new to Indonesia. So what this also demonstrates is that some of the barriers relate to knowledge and information about the market. Other barriers, of course, are market access, whether it is possible to even expand trade between the two countries, whether there are tariffs, whether there are non-tariff barriers, and how complicated that process is. Regulatory uncertainty also plays a role, whether businesses can be confident that the requirements that they need to fulfill for entering the market, which may take some time to overcome, will remain constant during that time. I think another interesting challenge that I read about from one particular new exporter to Indonesia is concern about whether the market is actually large enough. I think often people put at the high level that Indonesia is a country of over 270 million people, so of course the market is large enough. But for products and providers who are selling niche products or very premium products, the market is not 270 million people. And so whether the market is appropriate, whether there is enough, whether you can reach your customers is a legitimate concern as well. On IA-CEPA, it obviously cannot address all of these challenges. What IA-CEPA has done is to eliminate tariffs or to lower cost tariffs. So it's lowered the cost of an Australian product in Indonesia and an Indonesian product in Australia. It also brings about new rules for investment and services to make sure that businesses have certainty that when the law says that an Australian company can have 67% foreign ownership of a firm in Australia or a firm in Indonesia, and vice versa, that ownership they will not be required to divest that ownership in the short run. And I think importantly for trade and what others have found is when we're talking about some of these non-tariff barriers, what IA-CEPA has also done is through a process of some tariff rate quotas is that import permits for certain goods, for live cattle, beef grains, steel coil, certain citrus products, carrots and potatoes, will be provided automatically on a non-seasonal basis. So providing assurance to both the importer in Indonesia and the exporter in Australia that those products can come into the country. So while IA-CEPA cannot address all of these challenges, it does open doors. It's head-turning. Businesses in Australia and Indonesia are able to perceive each other as markets that are worthwhile exploring further. That some of the big challenges to entering the market in terms of actually being able to enter the market are overcome. Oh, sorry, have you lost my sound?
No, you have 2 minutes left to present.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so I think, so that's a great thing. And so the question about whether we can achieve the powerhouse, it's definitely, the answer is yes. We've talked about what Australia is. Australia is known as a safe, well-developed, secure, healthy food supply chain. Indonesia has got a manufacturing industry that is looking to export, to look and serve its domestic market with these kinds of products. We have knowledge and foods to share. And I think we can go beyond just our wheat example to some exciting new areas. And one of the key ways we are looking to do this, as previously mentioned, is through what is known as the IA-CEPA Economic Cooperation Program, which is going to be branded as Catalyst. Its goal is to improve that market access, to better integrate our markets, and to make sure that we have the skills to do it. And so that this program, which the Australian government is providing $40 million to over the next 4 years, will look at activities in agri-food, advanced manufacturing and services, which could also be in agri-food, and also in skills training, which could also be in agri-foods as well. So I think there are many opportunities, and I wanted to thank you for listening to me today. There is a lot of information out there about IA-CEPA, and I encourage you to look to it. And when the IA-CEPA ECP Catalyst program is launched, I encourage you to reach out to the team and look at new opportunities there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine, for your presentation. To summarize a little bit of your presentation, first is there is untapped potential of trade between Australia and Indonesia. And second is there is some challenge for trade, which is barriers of non-tariff and also tariff, government bureaucracy, and the question whether the market in Indonesia is truly big enough or not. And then eliminating tariff and lower the cost of both countries is the target of IA-CEPA, which can boost the two-way trade of both countries. And then last is that IA-CEPA can help with better integrated market, greater market access, and enhanced labor skill. Thank you, Christine, for your presentation. And last but not least, I would like to invite Ibu Nimade Ayu Martini as representative from the Ministry of Trade. To Ibu Nimade Ayu Martini, the screen is all yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Mbak Halima, for the opportunity. And it's great to share screen with Ibu Christine. Hello, Bu Christine. Good to see you again here. And of course, my friends, old dear friends, Pak Aco, one of the probably the best minds in economics that Indonesia ever had. So I wish, Pak Aco, I read your study first before bravely appearing to this webinar. But nevertheless, since this is about Indonesia Australia CEPA, which is one of the negotiations that dear to my heart. I was one of the people that delivered the baby. So I feel anytime somebody invited me to speak about IA-CEPA, I'm there. So, and today, although it is a difficult topic to discuss, but I try my best. to present my thought in 10 minutes or 10-15 minutes later to speak about building an economic powerhouse in food value chain, right? Let me begin by, because I was given 2 questions by the CIPS, by the committee. I'll start with the first questions. What is the objective? Why Indonesia and Australia doing this, right? Given the fact that we already had, can we go to the first slide, please? Given the fact that Indonesia already actually have ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand FTA, and now we are doing it bilaterally. That was regionally, and this is bilaterally. Actually, the answer is exactly what Pak Acho mentioned just now, right? Before, it was take and give. You export to Australia, we import from Australia, and vice versa. It's linear. Okay, how long can we do this? We cannot deepen our relationship by doing just traditional trade like that. In fact, by doing IA-CEPA, we want to deepen it, you know, and global value chain is one of them. So this is why Indonesia and Australia, by intention, picked the word CIPA. There's a partnership element into it. It's not only traditional FTA, free trade. You eliminate, you liberalize everything, tariff, and also goods, services, investment, and so on. But there is no partnership there. For what? This is the new model of trade agreement. We thought, given the where we are, the structure of our export, the closeness in our social, political, and people-to-people, I think Indonesia and Australia deserve to have a partnership. And this is why we're talking about it. Of course, the base is ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand FTA, ANSATA, but we want to go beyond, right? We can be so creative to do anything that we want to do because this is a bilateral. This is the philosophy why we're doing this. There are a lot of, this is probably for Indonesia at least, one of the most comprehensive or modern FTAs, if you call it FTAs, that Indonesia ever had. And we are quite excited to implement it. We did implement, we started it in July 2020. Unfortunately, the pandemic hit, right? And this is a big challenge, actually. This is probably one of the toughest challenges that Indonesia and Australia must face, not only because of 2 of us, right? But this is go beyond. This is global challenge that we're facing. So in terms of, I think Pak Acho and Ibu Christine already mentioned about what it is under IA-CEPA. I don't need to repeat once again, but tariff is one of them. But tariff will not be useful or if we don't go beyond it, right? At the end of the day, again, to the point that I mentioned, it becomes a take and give only, export and import. We want to go beyond that. This partnership, the number 4, Partner in Economic Cooperation Program, I think Ibu Christine already mentioned that is actually the key and core in our relationship. We already have aspiration, I would say, about Powerhouse. This is not, it doesn't say Powerhouse in our agreement, no. But both of us, leaders, ministers, and us, the negotiator, have behind our mind, back in our mind, that this is something that we can do together. Because when we see the numbers, as Ibu Christine or Pak Acho even mentioned just now, Indonesia is not number 1 trading partners by Australia and vice versa. Australia is not Indonesian, not even top 5, unfortunately. We are, in terms of our export destination, Australia is number 14. Import source is number 8. For Australia, Indonesia is number 15 for export. Imagine we have almost 300 million people here. You know, the market, when you talk about market, is lucrative, but still yet is number 15. And source of import is only number 12. compared to other ASEAN countries. This is why, to a second point that I mentioned, level playing and to make Indonesia more competitive. With Thailand, for example, in Australia and Thailand trade, two-way trade, just talk about trade, not investment, not services, over 10 billion US dollars. But just two of us is only 3.5 billion. It's very, very low. It's not good. We are frustrated. We both, I think, not only Indonesian, but also Australian. Why? Such a potential market and also partner, but yet we are still only below potential. This is one of the reasons why we wanted to push, and we are very glad that we managed to have very good agreement. We are very excited. We already laying down some of the program. Unfortunately, now with disruption in pandemic, this is indeed very difficult. But for me, on second slide, please. For me, it's not like we agree on in how Indonesia Australia CIPS support food and beverage industry. For sure, it's out of question. Of course, this is one of the biggest chunk of issue or sectors that we are talking about. Although there are COVID now, I don't want us to be discouraged. It's not the matter of what and how. I know it's a matter of when, but since when is not certain, right? I don't know when we open up our borders and economic started again to rise and so on and so forth. I think this is a time, the opportunity for both countries, both sides, to discuss and sit down and really, not only government, this is actually private sector. The economic powerhouse models or aspirations or concept is actually government with the private sector to discuss. Because in IA-CEPA, we discuss about services, right? Trade and services, how we can increase access to food and beverage sectors. We talk about import more, export more, invest, for example, in F&B sectors, hotels, restaurant, and so on. An element of human resources, this is important, although it's not directly, but we already, under IA-CEPA, have a lot of program on what we call VET, vocational education and training. And this directly or indirectly will help trade and services and investment partnership that we're going to do under the economic powerhouse concept. Next, please. Let me talk about economic powerhouse that we are talking about, or we've been talking about for quite some time. Next, please. What is it that we're talking about? Yeah, especially on food and next, please. F&B sectors. So, when we talk about food value chains, right, we need to talk about production to logistic, everything. From, I'm not an expert, Pak Acho is an expert, correct me if I'm wrong, but we imagine this is it, right? We need to take advantage of our FTS networks where Indonesia is a party or Australia is a party or both of us is a party. This is a modality, like timeless modality that we need to tap actually. Secondly, the cooperation aspect that I mentioned earlier, we already laying down under the economic cooperation program, Red Meat Initiative. I think the previous speakers mentioning about this, and yes, Indonesia import a lot from Australia. Australia export a lot to Indonesia, but sometimes, like today, like now, there's challenges, right? Because of the climate change, the supply from Australia is at stake. And Indonesia, who's relying a lot to Australia now, in a position that we cannot get enough supply from Australia. So we need, under this agreement, actually a sustainable trade. This is a key, actually. How can we have a sustainable trade? Both, we cannot always rely on each other, like Australia rely on export to Indonesia, Indonesia rely on import, or vice versa. How can we, through this agreement, can have a partnership whereby Australia invest in Indonesia in in cattle, in red meat. You know, we have the initiative, we have the model. It's not taking off yet, but I hope one day it will take off. Secondly, grains partnership. I think Pak Acho or Ibu Christine already mentioned how low actually Indonesia supply chain, global value chain in terms of food with Australia, 4%. I was quite shocked to see the numbers. But I think with this program under IA-CEPA, we need and we can be more engaged and deepening our relationship by investing in one of the first step, you know, you can do, because Indonesia have the market. Yeah. Third, we already agreed on opening up or establishing food innovation center. I know this is not a taking off yet, but we are in the process still discussing and push our association. GAPMI is one of the partners here with Ministry of Industry, Ministry of Agriculture here. How can we have an innovation center that can help Indonesian F&B industry collaborate with Australia? You know, Australia can invest in Indonesia, have the innovation center here, export to third market, using or taking advantage of all the trade agreements that we have. And this cooperation is actually not static. It's not only one-time show or one-time event or program. We have others that we can do together, and we have to put perspective long-term. It cannot be short-term. Red meat, grain partnership, and food innovation center may be short and medium-term, but other thing that we may come up in the future, it can be something that really utilized by both sides. Next, please. Third. Okay, the other question that given to me, how Indonesia's integration towards global value chain? Yeah, for sure, in terms of government policy, this is one of the trade policy or industrial policy objective that Indonesia trying to get into. I know it's not easy, a lot of challenges. Pak Acho knows very well, Bu Christine mentioned a little bit, but in terms how to get there, how to make Indonesia closer, you know, be part of global value chain is pretty much in the back of our mind of our policymakers. That for what? For income to increase our income per capita, for sure, and more importantly, by 2037, Indonesia has to live or avoid a middle income trap. Because by 2045, Indonesia wanted to be an advanced economy where we will be, if not number 5, number 4 economy in the world. And this is very important. For that, we need investment. For that, we need productivity. Next, please. In that connection, Indonesia, the government is pretty much aware what strategy that we need to do, what the reform that we're talking about that Pak Acho rightly pointed out actually. And we are very grateful actually in October 2020, we enacted, despite the crisis, the pandemic, we managed to finally gavel or issued an omnibus law. In this law, I'm sure many of you already read. Yeah, I know it's not all of them are completed its implementing regulation, but F&B is one of the sectors that are given attention, not only attention, but also concrete support. For example, in terms of tax allowance, yeah, according to presidential decree number 10, 2020, there are 2 incentives to F&B industry: tax allowance, the tax facility, and also investment allowance. And what are the F&B sectors that get this support? Yeah, agriculture like corn, soya, cereals that we're talking about earlier, dairy, meat, fisheries, bread, bread meaning what is it, like biscuit, right? The F&B, chocolate, sweets, confectionery, I would say, coffee, and so on and so forth. So Indonesian government already by intention wanted to build that industry. So in my view, that omnibus law combined together with Indonesia Australia CEPA can be a powerful vehicle for us to grow together in the F&B industry. So so I think it's not a instant. Of course, there are a lot of challenges, but I'm talking in terms of government reform, government regulations, and policy direction. It's there. You know, we have the agreement, we have the law on omnibus law. There is a powerful combination. Plus, next please. Plus, Indonesia continuously opening up, continuously doing its part to open its market, so that we can have better market access, and also opening up for other markets. These are some of the bilateral agenda in the negotiation that we are currently have the ongoing. If you see there, we have EU, we have Turkey, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Tunisia, Iran, Mauritius, Morocco, and there are a lot of at exploratory stage. Why? Because we do want to be part of global value chains by inviting investment, making it easier to do business, and also to import. Yeah, this is important. I know the criticism for quite some time about how difficult import regime in Indonesia, but my minister, the current administration, is very committed to make it easier, because when we talk about import, it's not only import for consumption. You know, this is beyond that. This is for our production, for our F&B also. And at the moment, we issued the government president's regulation also regarding the commodity, neraca komoditas, right? To make it easier, I think GAPMI, our association, Food and Beverage Association, is looking forward to make sure that when there's investment, there is also, it's followed also to make it easier to import input. Because without it, I think Pak Acho mentioned this earlier, if this is import substitution, to your point, right, it will be very, very difficult for Indonesia to be part of global value chain. So this is the idea, at least. There are a lot of, still there are a lot of implementing regulation or ministry regulation that needs to happen, but at least we know where our direction. And I think with this COVID situation at the moment, this is the time for us to make sure that the good regulation will be implemented post-COVID recovery. So that's from my side, Mbak Nur Halimah. I hope I answered the question that raised by the committee, but looking forward for the discussion with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ibu Nimade Ayu Martini. I would like to summarize a little bit some of your presentation. The first one is that IA-CEPA should go beyond the traditional trade agreement. It also it could help with creating a level of playing field and also to make Indonesia more competitive. The second one is that IA-CEPA help provide a platform for both the government and the private sector to create an economic powerhouse. The second one is that the cooperation between Australia and Indonesia and the advantage of FTA network of both countries is two modalities that should be utilized for sustainable powerhouse aspiration. And the last one is that the government of Indonesia's strategy to improve Indonesia global value chain integration is through omnibus law to streamline the regulation and also negotiating more trade agreement. Thank you so much, Ibu Nimade, for the presentation. Before going to the Q&A session, I would like to thank all panelists today to share some of interesting points about the F&B powerhouse and the opportunity that can be maximized through the IA-CEPA. I would like to remind today's participants as well that you can ask the question through the Q&A feature in Zoom and also the chat box in YouTube. And we already have several questions in here. The first question is from Iim Fatima from Business Indonesia. It was addressed to Ibu Nimade, Christine, and also Pak Arianto. The question is, commodity price have often fluctuated during pandemic, including the agricultural commodity from Australia that are used by Indonesia food processing industry, for example, cattle, cereal, and sugar. In a scenario where commodity price soar too high that it might cause difficulty for the industry to use it even there are benefit under IA-CEPA, is there any mechanism in which both Indonesia and Australia government play its role to resolve this problem? How to make sure the food value chain between two countries is efficient in the long run and can reach greater market with competitive price? So maybe Pak Acho would like to answer the question first.
Sure. Thank you, Mbak Iim Fatima. Maybe it's not just between Indonesia and Australia, but currently the supply chain is really being disrupted everywhere. So the consensus now is how to build more resilient value chains in the coming future, right? Given the fact that actually the trade patterns is more and more converging towards the GVC model. So in terms of collaboration between Indonesia and Australia, I think this is also another aspect that we need to address, how to improve the logistics basically between the two countries, and not just between the two countries, but also among regions in Indonesia, because that affects the price, of course. As you mentioned, especially when there are shocks like the current pandemic, and then it will be reflected in prices, but not only because of that, but also things like poor infrastructure, poor logistics system will also take into account, embedded in the volatility, the price volatility. So I remember more than 10 years ago when I was still at UI, when we did study on logistics, we calculated, if I remember correctly, the logistic cost and trucking cost in Indonesia is around 35 cents per kilometer, compared to the average in ASEAN, it was only 22 cents per kilometer, the trucking cost. And then one would probably believe that when we use sea or water transportation, it might be more efficient because Indonesia is archipelagic country, right? Unfortunately, it's even more expensive. It's about around 50 cents per kilometer, the logistic cost. So it's one of the highest logistic cost basically. So investing on these aspects, I think, is going to be very beneficial. So other infrastructure also, like cold storage system, and Indonesia can learn from Australian technology, for example, in that sense. And in terms of logistic or connectedness between provinces or remote regions, we can, for example, learn from the Philippines, because they're really good in their RoRo technology, roll on and roll off. It's amazing that Indonesia, as an archipelagic country, doesn't have a good RoRo system, to transport goods and services. So that's one issue that I'd like to address in terms of increasing the effectiveness or efficiency in the value chains between Indonesia and Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Acho. Maybe Bu Made would like to add some.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mbak Halima. I think I want to build up on Pak Acho's. I think he was right in saying logistic everywhere now is having a big problem due to the pandemic. That is why not only Indonesia and Australia, but in the regional forum or multilateral forums such as ASEAN, APEC, G20, even WTO, countries or governments are urged to urged not to impose or impeding trade, or impose or issued regulation that will impede trade. We already talked about, please make it easier to get vaccine, but I know it's a complex issue, and food, for example, or any health related goods. because we do really need it, Okay, back to the volatility of commodities. Okay, if we cannot touch that because it's price volatility, at least we can make it easier to do business. The trade facilities come into, make it easier for export and import. I think that's the best the government do, and reframe ourselves for imposing policies that will impede trade. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bu Nimade. Maybe Christine would like to add also.
I'll just say something very briefly because I think both previous speakers addressed it very well. Yes, there are price volatilities in agricultural trade because of climate conditions. And you'll see that during Australia's drought, Indonesia imported more wheat from the Ukraine. It may not be the exact perfect substitute, but in the short run, they continue to be able to operate because they can adjust what they're doing. Similarly with beef, perhaps there is an opportunity for, again, this is for customers rather than the government and for businesses to adjust whether you bring in the imported cow or the frozen beef. So it's looking at those kind of decisions yourself, and again, encourage not to introduce additional costs to business that don't have to be there. That's the key thing, because a lot of the additional costs come on top of the raw material costs, which is what makes it more expensive for the consumer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. And next we have question from Farah Siregar from UGM to Pak Aco. Considering that the GFC will increase the foreign content of each Indonesia and Australia export and import product, in other hand, import substitution strategy might impose risk to the bilateral partnership. How does Indonesia make sure that the local MSME will be involved fully and not be substituted by the foreign element?
Thank you, Mbak Farah. I think the key word here, as mentioned also by Bu Made very well, is partnership, right? But the partnership is not just between Australia and Indonesia, but also among firms and companies in Indonesia. So that is basically the idea of Powerhouse, because if you have Powerhouse as a hub, for example, and then it has branches, right? And these branches can be catered by, say, small or micro enterprises. So it's true that not everyone will be able to enter export market. I mean, studies have confirmed this, as actually those who can penetrate export markets are usually those already good, have high productivity, right? And we cannot expect instantaneously that micro and small medium enterprises have this kind of productivity and capability to penetrate export market, but they can supply to those who are in the forefront of the value chains, i.e. in the export market. So this partnership domestically is also very important, and that can actually be facilitated by allowing the micro and small enterprises to grow big, and then when they are big enough and have the power to penetrate export market, and they can do so as well. But along the way, when they are building this powerhouse, they're more like supplier to a bigger companies. So this partnership system domestically has to be also facilitated, right? But saying that, we need to also understand, and I think this is related to the other questions there. I see a very good question from Pak Sri Raharjo, or Mas Sri Raharjo, about the level of or the degree of involvement in the global value chains, and that can be from supplier point of view, producers, and then the seller and customer. So there are levels of roles, right? But again, I think this concept of partnership can also be applied there. What I'm I want to focus is the idea of having everything domestically or also implemented in the policy like import substitution. Bu Made already explained very well that it is not our objective to go to substitute everything, but we also need to understand, especially the public, that import substitution strategy may run counter towards the idea of global value chains. Why? Because in this era of GVC, value added can come from everywhere, right? So the idea is to think in terms of total value added rather than per unit value added. If we think of in terms of per unit value added, then we will not achieve the objective of increasing export earnings and total employment. Why? Because if we are obsessed with per unit value added, just think about iPhone, for example. iPhone in China, well, of course, designed by USA but assembled in China, the domestic value added, Chinese domestic value added is less than 6%, around 5%. But because the units produced are so many, you multiply that with hundreds of thousands of workers there, it creates total value added, which is huge, right? But if you think about per unit value added, then we reflect this in the policy like hilirisasi, for example, or downstreaming, that defies the objective of increasing employment and increasing total export earning. So that, I think, also address the question from Sri Raharjo and Mbak Nur Halimah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pak Acho. And I would like to ask a question to Christine. Indonesia and Australia have several partnerships, such as the Red Meat and Livestock Partnership, and also the Grain Partnership. How effective are existing partnerships in helping maximize the IA-CEPA implementation?
Thank you. So obviously those partnerships started before IA-CEPA came into force, but they have the same goals. And so what we are looking to do is we also coordinate across these programs. And so those new programs will work with the new IA-CEPA catalyst to share the information that they've generated and create newer programs that benefit them. So I think what it has done is the Red Meat and Cattle program and also the Grain Partnership is a lot about sharing some of the information about what you need, about taking care of animals, for example, or providing skills training. So what we plan to do is to build on all of those further, because you know, these are not, as Bu Made said, these are ongoing partnerships. As new techniques come into play, as new demands come from different areas, we'll need to adapt. And so we'll look to work with those programs as well as build new programs where necessary.
Thank you so much, Christian, for the answer. And next, we have question for Bu Made from Pinkan. How the cooperation with relevant line ministries such as the MOA, MOI, and even Bappenas have been rolled out after the IA-CEPA took effect in last year, particularly in order to maximize the potential in GFC integration. Is there any regular coordination meeting within ministry, business actor, or MSNC, and also with the Economic Cooperation Program Committee that's operating in Jakarta? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Pinkan, for the question. Very relevant and very important, actually. Indeed, this is probably one of the most frequent meetings that we have. Ibu Christine can testify, can agree with me on that. Because what we try to establish is a long-term economic cooperation program. We have not launched it formally, in the making. Very soon you will get the notification from our side, Indonesia and Australian side. But after we sign, after the signing of the IA-CEPA, even before that, we already talked about what kind of economic cooperation program that we would like to have. We already identify the key cooperation that we will have, and this is included the green partnership, like F&B, education, training, so many. There are so many. So we didn't talk about what is it called, TOR, not TOR, what is it called, application or a project, but what we talk about is program, is more long term. So Bappenas is our coordination. Why Bappenas? Because this is cross line ministries, and this is included in one of the cooperation with our training partners. And then who's underneath, which ministry are under, it depends on what kind of economic cooperation that we have. If this is regarding food and beverage, what we talk about today is obviously Ministry of Industry, yeah, because we talk about sector industry is manufacture or food, yeah, food manufacturing association, SMEs, and so on and so forth. And of course, Ministry of Agriculture as well involved, and also us, Ministry of Trade, because we will talk about promotion, about marketing, and so on. These are the three main actors. In fact, in the committee, we are sitting in the committee as well to make sure that this will implement smoothly. Yeah, but before that committee, we Pak Acho is one of them. Actually, we actually went to all stakeholders. We went to the association, the chambers, the universities, the academics, civil society, and so on and so forth, to make sure that the economic cooperation that we will have will benefit, yeah, Indonesia and Australia, both of us, and especially for Indonesia, we wanted to increase or improve our compliance to other market, obviously Australian market and the third market. When we go to Australia, we can also then go to Middle East, for example, to uplift the quality and also the competitiveness of our product, if we talk about products. So in terms of meetings, it's countless. I cannot count how many meetings we have, but in fact, until today, we still coordinate. We're still meeting, exchange of emails, Zoom meeting, and so on and so forth. But hopefully, it's going well, I must say, Ibu Pinkan. But hopefully, we can launch formally. But we will find an event that is suitable for that. So, but I want to say that program is being developed, right? But it doesn't mean it's fixed. We still be open for ideas. Because this is very dynamic. Sometimes things change. We talk about e-commerce, for instance, in the future. Who knows? Climate change, sustainability product, and so on. It's very, very possible. And then Indonesia and Australia would sit down again and to do the next one, for example. Of course, we have priority, short-term, medium-term, and long-term priorities. That's already being settled, but it doesn't mean it's fixed. We can be open and feel free to have idea if you wish, and you can channel it through us, to me at Minister of Trade, or to Ibu Christine at the embassy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We also have a last question from Muhammad Iqbal Hafizon. I think this is addressed to Ibu Made. What mechanism does IA-CEPA provide for Indonesia and Australia to enhance technical cooperation at the provincial level? What opportunity can the province in Indonesia have for this cooperation? Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like Ibu Christine also to add if you have later on. Obviously, in terms of benefit or implementation of IA-CEPA, we wanted to reach inclusive. Yeah, it's not only to the cities or urban, but also rural, including provincial governments or sub-provincial, kabupaten, kecamatan, everywhere in Indonesia, because this is between Indonesia and Australia. So this is actually why, Ibu Nur Halimah, we've been doing socialization program tirelessly. Indonesian Minister of Trade with the embassy here with private sector, with Kadin, together with province, yeah, and also we have FTA centers in 6 cities. Actually, we're doing it to make sure that this agreement is being understood. So if they understand about this, they can utilize it, right? So now talking about opportunities, it depends what kind of sectors that you're interested in. Let's say about export and import, right? Let's say food, let's say, because we talk about food today. If you are, but first thing you need to know is, of course, the regulation, right? What kind of regulations that's there to export to Australia? That's very basic. We have link website that explain about the tariff. Tariff is zero. Don't worry about tariff because it's zero. Secondly, to get that zero, what is the requirement, right? What non-tariff measures that are available there in terms of standard, labeling, and so on and so forth that requires by Australia because they are the market. This kind of thing you need to know first. You know, in order to know, you can open the website. You can go to FTA centers that we have in 6 cities: Jakarta, Bandung, Medan, Balikpapan, Makassar, Semarang, and Surabaya. Yeah, still limited to 6. We are going to expand it. If not, you can always call us, send email to us, and DGPEN, which is Export Promotion Center, can be heavily assist you, or even our trade attaché in Canberra and our trade office in Sydney. You know, we have the coaching program. If you're not ready, let's say you are SMEs, right? Not ready, because we have to curate, right? You have to make sure when you want to export, you can fulfill the request by the market. You know, you don't want to just go export one time and after that no more, because this is about credibility. So you need to be ready. Basically, if you're not ready, there are training program. In terms of training program, DGPEN, as I said, have a lot of program. Look at the website of our DigiNet for that kind of training. When we talk about vocational education, or even what we call magang, ya, or what is it called, magang? Apa sih namanya magang in English? Internship program. We actually, under Indonesia Australia CEPA, we have this program. But unfortunately, Bapak dan Ibu, at the moment, because of COVID, yeah, the border is closed. Unfortunately, we have to defer until at further notice when we can control this pandemic. Hopefully, Australia will be open, because we do have 5,000 young people, you know, students, you know, from university that can go to Australia, can work there at the same time holiday. You know, this is we talk about the past. We have this program under bilateral scheme and also under IA-CEPA scheme, but hopefully soon enough, hopefully we can utilize that. We have also in terms of exchange from one company to company in Australia and vice versa. We have also this program, which is overseen by our Kadin, you know, because we have Australia have investment in Indonesia. You want to improve, right, the internal human resources here in Indonesia. You send your manager level, for example, or above, to train. So we make it easier for that exchange of people, you know, without a lot of barriers, like if we don't have IA-CEPA. And other, actually the opportunity is a lot, but please feel free to ask me question in concrete term if you are interested. You know, I don't know where is Bapak tadi asking, but do contact us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Ibu Made. The last question from Iqbal marks the end of our discussion today. To summarize today's discussion, first is that IA-CEPA opens new opportunity for both Indonesia and Australia, especially in the complementary sector, especially in the food and beverage sector. And then the IA-CEPA provide an opportunity for the government and private sector to leverage an economic powerhouse. IA-CEPA can also help create level playing field and improve Indonesia competitiveness. The third one is regulation reform and better logistics in Indonesia can help with integration of Indonesia to the GFC and leverage the powerhouse aspiration. And then the fourth one is that the government held regular coordination meeting with relevant ministry, private sector, and also the Economic Cooperation Program Committee to ensure long-term partnership and maximize the GFC integration. And then last is that the government of Indonesia with the Australia Embassy and relevant stakeholder has been promoting and holding socialization as well as coaching and training so everyone can benefit from the IA-CEPA and also leverage it. Thank you for all the panelists for your time, and also thank you for your participants to watching today's webinar. I will return today's session to our host, Tira. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Halima, for leading the discussion today. And I also would like to thank Pak Aco, Ibu Made, and also Christine for participating in today's webinar. Before we close our webinar today, I would like to share some information about CIPS and also about our upcoming events. The paper on the IA-CEPA building the powerhouse can be downloaded on the links that I have provided in the chat box, or you can also scan the QR code provided on your screen. You can download it for free and also share it to your colleagues. We are also on the topic of new papers. Tomorrow, we are also going to release our paper on the non-tariff measures. So you can go to our website tomorrow and download the paper for free. And we have a great news. Next week, we are going to have our first Indonesia Policy Dialogue series. It's actually an online event co-organized with ANU Indonesia Project, where we invite high-ranking government officials to discuss policy issues. To kick off our first Indonesia Policy Dialogue, we invite Bapak Muhammad Lutfi, the Minister of Trade of the Republic of Indonesia, to discuss about trade regulations in Indonesia, specifically in supporting the economic recovery post-COVID-19. You can go to the link on the screen to register, which is the bit.ly/IPD-trade. And actually next week, Pak Aco will also going to moderate the discussion, so you will also catch him next week. And next, you can also don't forget to follow our social media accounts so you won't miss any information about our events, including the ones that are going to be held next week. CIPS is an independent and non-profit organization, so we hope you can support us by donating to our organization by using the QR code on the screen. You can scan it with the e-wallet of your choice, and you can donate as little as 10,000 rupiah, and later on you can also be included in our membership supporter club. Your donation would mean so much to us and can help us to create more free and prosperous Indonesia. That is all the information that I'm going to share today. We hope today's discussion will enlighten you on the opportunities arising from creating an F&B powerhouse through the IA-CEPA. We thank you to all participants today and also to all panelists. We hope all of you are staying healthy during this pandemic. See you on the next CIPS events. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mas Aco. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Mbak Made.
Thank you.
Makasih.
Ya, thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank
Halima.
you.
Thank you. See you soon.
See you.
Thank you, everyone.